You know what's above average, or shall I say beyond normal? The supernatural, of course, and I'm not talking about that one kid's good grades. No, we're talking about creatures that shouldn't exist, spirits that still lurk on this plane, and that weird pulsating thing that I'm too afraid to clean out of my fridge. I mean, what if it latches onto me? Anyway, these are 5 allegedly true and terrifying supernatural horror stories. If you have a story, share it with us at darkstories.org. Now, let's begin. Late Night Encounter from ToonJon. This takes place in the summer of 2011, in a very small town in the hills of Tennessee. I remember the day like it was yesterday, and I don't think I'll ever forget what happened that night. It was a cloudy day. It had been sprinkling rain here and there. I was 20 years old and still lived with my parents. I was excited that day because one of my best friends was going to come over for what would most likely be an all-night gaming session. His name is Eric. Shortly before Eric arrived, our neighborhood lost power. The house is on a hill with all of our neighbors being members of the family. Losing power really sucked, but wasn't too uncommon around here. I remember feeling disappointed, hoping the power would come back on before he arrived, so as to not disrupt our plans. I figured it would, as it wasn't storming at the time. Our local power company was called. They simply claimed that they were working on it at the moment, with no ETA on restoration. Well, soon enough, Eric arrived, and we decided to kill some time by going outside and just walking around. We stayed outside until it got dark. Then we headed back in, wondering just how much longer the power would be out. We sat around, struggling to stay occupied. Most of the time, we ended up just talking in my room. A few hours later, we decided to make a McDonald's run for some food. We hopped in one of our cars and took off. I remember being irritated because shortly after leaving my house, I saw homes with normal power. Apparently, it was still affecting just our immediate neighborhood still. Lucky us, I guess. After getting some food, we got back home to a dark house and accepted that we probably wouldn't be gaming that night, so we'd have to find something else to do. After eating, we began to grow bored of just sitting around, so we decided to head outside again, walking laps around my house. Around 2 or 3 a.m., I remember the two of us were talking about Mortal Kombat, slowly making our way around the house. Once we made it to the other side of the house, we stopped to chill for a while, still talking. I remember how strangely bright it was outside. None of the street lights or house lights were on, but the moon was just big enough to light up the area with ease as the clouds had moved on. It was eerily quiet without the hum of the street lights. We weren't talking about anything scary. We were just joking around and laughing when it happened. Eric suddenly mentioned, "That's weird. I thought I saw something move down at your grandma's storage building." So we both began looking in that direction. It was at the bottom of the hill and would be hard to make out any real features of someone from that distance. I didn't see anything at the moment, but within 5 seconds our minds would be blown. A solid white humanoid figure stepped out from the corner of the house right in front of us. I was immediately horrified that someone had snuck up on us, and my body began to move on its own, turning and beginning to sprint about 5 steps before stopping. I suddenly turned around to see the figure standing perfectly still. Then my mind began to race, trying to come up with a logical explanation for what I was seeing. It's the gutter, I thought to myself, trying to make sense of it. I remember looking at the white gutter against the house and seeing the space between it and the figure. My body was trembling and I felt my face go pale. I quickly glanced at Eric, who was standing directly in front of the figure, not moving a muscle. He was frozen. That thing must have been at least 5 feet in front of him. I looked back to the figure. It was solid white and illuminated by light. I could not see through it. It stood at about the same height as Eric, who was 6'3". The figure was human in shape, but lacked features on its body. I could see arms hanging down at its side. I'd been looking at the figure's body this whole time, but felt the need to try to make out its face. This is going to sound weird, but it's hard to explain this portion of the story. When looking at the chest area of this thing, it appeared to have a solid blank white head and face, matching the rest of its body. When I looked up to try to see if it had a face, I was met with something that looked like what I imagined a black hole in space would look like. The face area was just a dark void that appeared to be twirling inward, but when I looked away, it appeared white again. I looked back to my friend Eric. "We need to go inside, Eric," I said. I watched as he nodded and slowly began to step my way. The figure didn't move. When Eric made it over to me, we both simply began to walk backwards, expecting this thing to suddenly lunge at us at any point, attempt to chase us. But it didn't. We lost sight of it as we rounded the corner of the house, still on high alert, but we made it inside without an issue. We immediately ran to my room, looking out the window. The event had happened right below that window. The white being was no longer there, and we ran to every window trying to look out of it, to find it, but with no luck. I was still shaking, and I looked at Eric. "Dude, tell me you saw that out there." I asked him, feeling crazy. Eric replied, "If you mean that white figure that stepped out of the corner of your house and just stood there, yeah, I saw it. I'm so glad you didn't just leave me, because if you hadn't said something, I would have just stayed there, frozen." Eric and I couldn't wait for the power to come back on, even more now. We wanted to look up what we may have seen online. Plus, being in the dark after an experience like that, it's creepy. When we were finally able to look up anything, we could not find any similar happenings. We decided to wait until daylight, then we'd go back outside and investigate that spot. We told all of our friends and family of the incident. Some thought we were crazy and others were intrigued. Oddly enough, I discovered that Eric did not experience everything exactly the same. He did not see the black vortex-like face when trying to make out the details of the creature. Rather, he described its face, or the facial area, as pure white. Also, Eric seemingly forgot mentioning seeing something at my grandmother's shed. I brought up time and time again that just before the thing came around the corner, that's what he said to me, forcing us both to look in that direction in the first place. He said, "Yeah, maybe I did say that, I just don't remember." Years later, something else happened that may be linked to this story. My mom informed me that my little sister and her friend were outside sledding in the snow at my neighbor's house, directly above my grandma's shed. Her friend had never heard the story, but regardless, she experienced something odd there. She told my sister, "I just saw something moving around at your grandma's shed. Can we go inside?" Upon hearing this, I got chills, but still, I know it's not very concrete. You may not believe my story, but I'm telling you 100% honestly that this was something that affected mine and Eric's views of the world. Irish Backroads from AdmiralA. I live in Ireland, and it has a lot of back roads. This event happened actually a couple of days ago. It was around 9:30 p.m. I was taking a walk with my dog. I like to walk him at night as very few dogs and people are around still. I live on an estate, and outside my estate there is a long stretch of back roads which leads to a large farm. My dog and I usually walk down this road as there is hardly ever any other people around and barely any cars. Needless to say, we never had much of a problem there, until that night. Now, I wear glasses. I've started trying out contacts, but it's a bit rough. My only pair of glasses at the moment were breaking, so they were pretty flimsy and held together by glue. Also to note, my dog is a border collie, so he's a decently sized dog, but he still gets very anxious and easily startled at times. So while we were walking, we heard a cow, which was common around here. But it still spooked my dog a bit, so I decided to hurry up and walk to the no trespassing sign we usually walk to. Then I turned back around and began to walk home. On the way back, we heard a cow again. No clue if it was the same one from before, but it sounded like it was in pain. It was very loud, and this scared my dog once more, so he began to run. I was only 5'5", so he was basically tugging me along. I had to start running as well to keep up, and this caused my flimsy glasses to fall off and break. I picked them up, and I tried to find one of the broken arms. I managed to get my dog to stop running at that point. I had to backtrack a bit, trying to find the spot that the arm fell. I started looking, which was hard with no glasses. That's when we heard another sound. At first, I thought it was the cow, but after that split second of ignorance, I realized this was a woman's scream. A woman that apparently smoked her entire life. That's what it sounded like. It was loud and hoarse, taking me and my dog by surprise. This time, we both began running. Now, this stretch of road is really long. We were only about halfway across it, so we had another 20 minutes if we walked. While we were running, I kept hearing that god-awful shriek. It was getting closer. I knew soon that this thing was chasing us. After a few seconds, beside me in the tree line to the left, I could make out a dark figure moving along with us. Eventually, it sort of faded away. We made it out of there. Just before getting back to the estate, I turned and looked back in the middle of the road. And there, I saw a black figure staring back at me. Now, had it been a woman in trouble who was chasing me and screaming for help, why would she just stop right there and stare, all creepy? Not to mention, this figure was really tall. It wasn't a shadow or a ghost, as the leaves and bushes shook and reacted when it walked past. Even though I didn't have my glasses, I was sure I'd seen it there. My dog was staring too, growling at the figure. On the way back to the house, we kept glancing in that direction. That god-forsaken scream wasn't getting closer anymore, but it kept going outside the estate. I definitely won't be walking back there, but now I wonder what it could have been. I don't know what I encountered in the Australian woods. From Enigma Cypher 17, from the subreddit r/thetruthis_here. Just down the road from where a few years ago I'd previously lived in Southeast Australia is the opening into about 100 acres of woodlands and a bush that I frequently went into when I was younger to do the usual things, like riding and camping. One night I was out driving at around 11:30 p.m. I was with my girlfriend, and as we were in the area, I decided to show her the woodlands. She loves everything to do with nature, and it was summer, so it was an extremely warm night. I left my car with the light shining into the trees, as we weren't going too far in, and it was pitch black. The two of us just kind of sat there chatting, having a smoke and generally relaxing. She was sitting on a sort of map of the area that had been put in some plastic, while I was keeping an eye on the trees. because I had a feeling that something was just wrong. I've read a few stories of people that have said that they have felt that they were in danger, although nothing around them was really off. It was the same feeling I had then. Every sense was almost reaching out and my adrenaline was up, but there wasn't really anything in my eye line that seemed different. After lighting another cigarette to calm my nerves, I scanned the tree line again, realizing that it now looked different than before. It was only after staring into the dark that I saw that there was moonlight now lighting up grass where it couldn't before, as there was a black shape blocking it, a shape that I thought before was just a tree. I got goosebumps just typing this, but the only way to describe this was that all sound just ceased, and everything went dead silent. A few seconds later, this disgusting feeling of dread fell over me, and I saw motion in the dark part of the path as this thing crawled towards us on all fours. I've seen nearly every animal in the outback here, and we don't have any large predators like in the US or Europe. But somehow I knew this thing was a predator, and it wasn't hiding itself from us, but just slowly crawling forward towards us. I don't know if my girlfriend saw it or not, as I couldn't look away, but just as it reached the line my car lights were able to illuminate, it reared up on two legs and just sat there staring at us. I'm 6'4", and this thing was about another meter larger than me, with arms that were far too long that reached down near the ground. All I could make out was an off-white, almost yellowish fur, and in the dim light, I could see the silhouette of its head. It was shaped like a dog or wolf. I wasn't able to move as it stared at me, but it was at that point my girlfriend gasped, which seemed to disrupt whatever was stopping me from thinking logically. I grabbed her by the arm and I sprinted back to the car, slamming the doors and tearing out of there as fast as I could. Both of us were too terrified to speak until about half an hour later. We've both discussed it many times, and the feeling that we had was what I imagine a rabbit sees when it catches a wolf or fox looking at it, that this was something that would be able to end us with absolute ease if it so chose. Neither of us have been able to come up with any explanation for what it was, but it has definitely changed the way I view the woods and bush when I go camping or hiking now. I think back to that, and I wonder what it was. I wonder if I'll ever see anything like it again. Horror Woods from LimboTheLost. There's a certain area of woods in Sweden where a lot of people have weird experiences. It's a small nature reserve a 5-minute walk from where I live. It's pretty much a small patch of woods, but still big enough for you to get lost in if you don't know the place. The entire reserve has old ruins of old structures of farms and such. Obviously, no one lives there anymore. As I said, now it's a nature reserve. But there isn't really much information about the old farms and structures that used to be there either. Just like a little piece of forgotten history. I feel like I keep coming across new, unseen structures every time I go there during the day, as I often go there to wander about the paths and off the paths. The first creepy memory I have of the place, I was maybe 7 or so. I was pissed at my parents for one reason or another, so while it was still dark, I decided I'd run away to that place in the middle of the night. Not sure why I picked that place of all possible places, but I did. I can easily say that even as a child, I wasn't one to be easily scared. But the moment I set foot in those woods that night, something felt extremely off. But I was a stubborn kid. I still made it to a little favorite spot of mine, with a little bridge over a stream, deciding that I'd just stay there till morning. All night, though, I swear I kept seeing shadows moving just out of the corner of my eyes, and I kept hearing noises of something moving closer. Or maybe it was some things. In the end, I climbed up a tree as high up as I could, and I didn't dare come down or even look down until light. I could hear something walking around below me, but I was so terrified that I just stayed silent and looked up at the sky instead. Somehow I had a feeling that whatever it was, it would be gone once the sun came up, and the moment the morning came, I freaking booked it back home. I was home before my parents were even awake, so they didn't even know I was gone in the first place. Shortly after we moved to an apartment closer to the place, our dog was still alive back then. I used to be in charge of taking her for walks during the evening and nights, and always went towards that area, but I stuck to a more well-lit road that is used mostly by farmers and even some hunters. They only had streetlights up to the point where the paved road turns to gravel road. After that, it was pitch black. I obviously never went past that point at night. Always got goosebumps going near that place in the dark. Our dog was always on high alert when we got to the end of the lights on the road. One night, she was extremely alert, and as we reached the usual stopping point where we turned around and headed home, she stood still, staring into the dark, growling at something, and I had no idea what it was. I could not see or hear anything else out there but us. But she was so uneasy, so on edge. I had to pretty much drag her away from there. But once we were a ways away, she started whining, pulling at the leash, wanting to get the hell out of there. I certainly didn't blame her. Something was just very off that night. On another occasion, when walking there with the dog at night again, it was brighter thanks to the full moon. Out of morbid curiosity, I figured I'd dare to go a bit further this time, but still only so far that I could still see the lights. It didn't take long until things got eerie. My dog was starting to become alert again, and in an open area next to us, I kept seeing faint white apparitions, things appearing at the corners of my eye, pretty much all around us. They would disappear the moment I tried to look at them, but they were definitely there. But from what I did see, it looked like someone wearing long white dresses, blowing in the breeze. If I was alone, I'd be thinking I'm just seeing things, but as my dog was there with me, and she was seeing something too, she was on edge, it was probably no surprise that we ended up booking it out of there. Soon after my dog passed away from old age, I was walking on the paved, lit-up road. It was kind of in the morning. I was thinking of her and all the walks we used to take on the road. I think it was 3 a.m. at that point. While walking, kind of sulking, being pretty down and all, I could have sworn I heard someone crying by the edge of the woods. I tried calling out at first, seeing if anyone would answer, but there was nothing, just the crying sound. I started walking a little closer and it sounded like the crying increased, so I was starting to be convinced someone had to be there, even if I couldn't see them yet. It sounded like a child crying. My mind was telling me that I couldn't just turn around and leave, but at the same time, something in my mind was screaming at me to get out of there as fast as possible. But in the typical white person fashion, I approached this crying sound instead. As I get to just about where the crying came from, I heard footsteps running away from me, but the crying continued, going deeper into the woods. By then, I was so sure it had to be a kid or something. I kept following the crying deeper and deeper, until I noticed I was too far in. I could hardly see the streetlights anymore. I stopped then, and something really didn't feel right about the whole thing. I hadn't felt right to begin with. I figured if it was a kid, maybe I should actually go call the cops, instead of blindly following the crying. Just as I was about to turn around, I saw something huge and black stand up among the trees. It let out a low, angry snarl before it took off into the woods. I took off in the other direction, heading home as quickly as I possibly could. After that, I didn't go back in the woods for a while. I was too darn scared of the place at that point. But moving on to the fifth account, which was my brother's experience. He had gone there during the day for a nice little stroll, and he had decided to take a different path than the usual ones, since he hadn't gone in that direction before. And from what he told me, things did start to feel eerie, and the woods felt as if they grew darker around him. He kept walking for a bit, until he reached a little clear area by a cliff. He found a statue there of the Holy Mary standing in the middle of it. Keep in mind, this was in the middle of nowhere, away from any homes and such. He left quickly as he said it didn't feel right, so he just wanted to leave, and he's the skeptic type, so for him to feel unnerved is quite rare. Later on, I went out walking again since I wanted to see if I could find the statue my brother told me about. I also brought along a former neighbor kid that likes to come on long walks with me. I had a heck of a lot of fun at first, kind of goofing around, joking about stuff, and so on. But once we'd come to a more open area of the path, the smell of decay just hit us really hard. We had no idea where on earth it was coming from. We figured there must be a dead animal somewhere nearby, so we just wanted to keep walking until we passed it. At that point, I did spot something that gave me chills. I told the kid to stay where she was and to not look and just wait a bit, so I could go closer to confirm what I was actually seeing. This of course scared her, but she did as I asked. From what I could see, on the other side of a tree, it looked like someone was hanging from it. Pants, jacket, hat, I was starting to think that it might be the source of that smell, and if it actually was, I wasn't about to let that kid see it, and the closer I got, the more convinced I was that I was probably about to see someone's dead body hanging from the tree. The moment I finally made it to the other side, I was so relieved to see that it was really nothing more than empty clothes, arranged in such a manner that it looked like a person. Not sure why it was there, but I'm sure you can imagine the amount of relief washing over me just seeing that, and I could finally call the kid over to come see it. Still, I never did find out where the rotting smell came from, but at that point I really didn't want to know. I just wanted to leave. That's pretty much the experiences I've had there through the years, at least the ones I remember. There's something off about that place, I just know it, but I can't bring myself to avoid it forever. Hiking in the UK. From Chadco888, posted on the subreddit r/thetruthishhere. My partner and I went hiking to a place in central UK, Shropshire. We were walking up to the peak of this hill that is scattered with giant 50 to 60 foot rock formations, small rocks all piled in mounds. Google Devil's Chair and you'll get it. It was early in the morning. Sun was rising, but the area was fully lit. We were all alone, and my partner was behind me struggling to keep up, looking down to watch where she was walking, so didn't see a thing. I looked ahead, and on the leftmost mound of rocks, there was what I thought was a person. I was pissed off that I'd have to say that begrudging British good morning to a complete stranger, when all I wanted was tranquility. Suddenly, this person bent forward and put all fours on the ground, but not bent in half. It had a full U-shaped bend to it, like a rainbow. That's when I realized this person wasn't wearing clothes at all. And then it began to move. I can't describe how it moved, almost like a centipede with precise agility over the rock formations. Whilst soiling myself, I ran ahead to see what the hell it was. It was no animal I have ever experienced in my life, and it was gone without a trace. When I made it to the rocks, I realized that it possibly stood about 7 to 8 feet tall on its hind legs. Safe to say, I was on edge the whole hike then, and getting back to my car was an absolute highlight. Humanoids, crying children, screaming creatures. The supernatural is certainly something to be feared. These stories are the reason I don't sleep with my feet coming out of the blanket, because everyone knows you'll lose some toes to the boogeyman if you do that, and I prefer to walk without a limp in my step. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode of Darkness Prevails, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have a story and you want it narrated, all you gotta do is send it over to darkstories.org. If you want to support the show, check the links below. There's a link to my Patreon and a link to my merch store. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous episode. Kane7fi says, "All hail Krampus." You can be a kiss up to Krampus all you want, but he's still gonna shove you in his bag of sticks. Heather J says, "It's beginning to look a lot like Screw This." I like that, it's got a ring to it. Wiccan Light says, "You're amazing. I work the night shift at my hotel and your videos keep me awake all night. I love it." Night shift at a hotel, huh? Well, I'm sure you've got a story and I want to hear it. Let me ask you what your creepy experience working there is. Aladdin bin Terzi says, "Just your regular Muslim trying to enjoy the holiday season." Well, I hope you have a good one. If I could ask, what's your favorite tradition when you celebrate the holidays? As for my boring self, I enjoy watching the holiday movies, especially Halloween holiday movies. Faith the Nerd says, "The only thing that's scarier than these stories is Christmas shopping on Sunday. Wish me luck." Wish you luck, more like send you football pads. Maybe that'll keep you alive. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode, but don't you worry, because more scary stories are on the way soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. Remember, stay safe out there, and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.